The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed in the podcast belong solely to the hosts and not the host's past, present, or future employers. Hello, welcome back. It's Brian, Mr. Betcher, and Mr. Berlin for Breaking Down Security.
Hello.
Hey. We are back. So for those of you in, the rest of the world listening to this is probably the first time in about 4 or 5 weeks we've all been in the same room together. Zoom room in specific.
Yes. Yeah.
Virtually.
Virtually. So it's good to see y'all. I hope y'all are doing well. Mr. Betcher, are you doing okay? Everything good?
Everything's good.
Weather's just lovely down in Austin this time of year. I miss it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Ms. Berlin, are you moved into your house?
No, not until the 11th. I start moving the 11th because my
God.
closing date for this house I'm selling is the 1st.
Oh, okay.
And the closing date for the house I'm buying is on the 11th, but I have to be out of this house by the 14th. So I'm packing everything now.
Okay.
Because I'm moving in like 2 days, like 2 or 3 days over a weekend. So
Good
it's
God.
like, and then somehow decorating for Christmas.
You don't have to decorate for Christmas.
I have children. Of course I do.
Well, they can decorate for Christmas. My wife has color coordinated responses. So one year she'll do silver and blue, next year's red and gold, or green and blue, or whatever. She tries to. It's not tied to any football or hand egg team or anything like that, but she just enjoys mixing and matching her colors to great effect. So
okay.
We're not doing it much this year either because we're renovating our downstairs. So for 3 weeks we'll be living upstairs. And I'll be doing like the rest of America, and I mentioned before the podcast, but I'll be taking my Zoom meetings in the closet, which apparently is superiorly acoustic.
I imagine it's really good, acoustically speaking.
Yeah, all the clothes there's no echo, so it's really nice. Yeah, I can understand why Mr. Betcher records in his closet. So
Yes, my
you
closet.
do, don't you? You've got the desk in your closet.
Of course.
Yeah.
Oh.
I will be having more than 10 people at my house. So there's that.
Oh, are they family and quarantined?
Family, yeah.
Okay. I figured, if your mother-in-law could show up, you could just put her in the garage to stay for a few days. There's nothing wrong with that. So.
Yeah, or the greenhouse. Either way.
Yeah. Green. Oh, there you go. Cool. So there's been a good 2-3 weeks here that we've not all been together. So I appreciate everybody making it. Before we go, I know this is going to happen on Thanksgiving, but I hope y'all have a good Thanksgiving and had a good Thanksgiving and stay safe for the U.S. folks. Everyone else, happy Thursday. It is what it is. Cool. So in keeping with the end of the year, we always get some interesting items, and I follow quite a few people as I do on Twitter, and something came up that was quite interesting, and we have that gentleman here. His name is Marcello Salvati, which doesn't, everybody's like, who the hell is that? But on Twitter, he's known as Byte Bleeder. Remove all the E's and replace them with 3's, and you'll have Byte Bleeder. And welcome to the show, Marcello.
Oh, nice to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Right on. So, one thing I'd like to ask you is tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, sure thing. Right now I am a red teamer / pen tester at Black Hills Information Security. I've been involved in the open source project /infosec / hacking tool developer community for right about 10 to 11 years now. So I've mostly been doing that. That's how I got my first job in InfoSec, was through one of those projects I created. So I've definitely had a lot of experience in that space. I just started creating these tools and mainly to just escape the little town in Italy that I grew up in. And then after I accomplished that goal, I got a job originally at Coalfire, then moved over to Black Hills, and yeah, I've been doing consulting ever since.
Okay, very cool. Could you give us an idea of what kind of open source tools you have released?
Yeah, sure. A few of them are just mainly just like little buckets of just research slash notes slash proof of concept code that I threw out there. But a few of them have become somewhat popular. There is CrackLab exec specifically that has sort of become like a big deal. I still don't understand why, considering the code. The code in that project is definitely not something to be proud of, but hey, it was one of my first projects, so I'm not, I'm not going to judge. I guess, please don't judge me harshly. But also I released Silent Trinity, which is a command and control platform that does things a little bit differently in regards to the C# tradecraft that's been coming out in the red team and pen testing sphere recently. There's been like a huge migration from PowerShell to C# over the past few years in terms of attack tools. Also I started out, one of my first ever project though was MITMF, which stands for Man in the Middle Framework. And that was sort of my take on modernizing man in the middle attacks. This is before BetterCap came out. The only thing that was available was EtterCap, and EtterCap was definitely not the best thing in the world to work in, and it had a bunch of bugs and stuff. So that was my take on sort of modernizing that entire sphere of attacks. But yeah, I've also released some other projects like Witness Me and Spraying Toolkit, which try to automate a little bit of the pen testing tasks that we do. One's a screenshotting tool, which sort of does things a little bit differently just to suit my own workflow, and Spraying Toolkit, which also does password spraying for O365 attacks and stuff like that.
Okay. All right. So you are very much a fan of open source and releasing tools that are open source, and we've had a few shows in the last year talking about not just vuln disclosure, but whether or not tools should be releasing tools much like CrackMap exec and those being used not just for good purposes but ill intent as well. We had Mick Douglas on earlier this year, I think, or late last year. We've had Dave Kennedy on talking about that as well. I think mid last year about that as discussing the pros and cons of that. So maybe we can pick your brain if we get some time left on that. But
yeah, sure.
All right, so you created something called Porchetta Industries.
Correct. Yes.
One, my mouth started salivating when I saw Porchetta Industries. So I was like, "Oh wow, somebody's creating a pork product company for InfoSec." And I was like, "Well, no, it's not that lucky." Maybe you could tell us a little bit about what that is about, the Porchetta Industries. And
yeah, sure thing. From. Yeah, so porchetta is actually it's a delicacy from where I grew up in Italy, and essentially it's dried wild boar meat. So they take wild boar and they dry it, and it's probably the most delicious thing on the planet. And I think at the time when I tried to come up with a name for the LLC, I was just super hungry. So I think I was just sure, why not? Let's just do that, and let's make it a soft. Let's just call it that, and why not? It doesn't really make any sense in Italian, but whatever. You can ignore that. It's fine. It sounds interesting. So that's part of it. But the main idea behind it, initially, the main idea behind it was just an LLC so that I can take the money that I got through GitHub, this GitHub sponsorship program, and just throw it in there just for keepsaking tax purposes and stuff. And then it turned out to be. Then I opened up a Discord channel, and I realized that I had an opportunity here in terms of trying to come up with a way to help people do sort of the same thing that I was doing. And the reason for this was there was a bunch of reasons. One was it was the timely release of the GitHub sponsorship program. So GitHub introduced this thing, if you're not familiar, called GitHub sponsorships, which is essentially, you can sort of think of it like a Patreon, only it's integrated within GitHub itself. So you can go to individual GitHub profiles and literally, sponsor them and give them 5, 10, 15, the profiles can set up the tiers the sponsorship tiers that you want. So depending on what they set up, you can give them that amount of money if you feel that their the stuff that they've been writing in open source has been helpful. So it was that, plus a release of this amazing article by Caleb Porzio, which he sort of came up with this concept on a podcast, and he named it with another person, which I forget the name of, and he called it sponsorware, where essentially what you do is you use this GitHub sponsorship feature and you set up tiers for sponsorship tiers, and each tier, the person that sponsors you gets a specific perk, right? So like at $15, just for an example, just to give you what my tier list looks like, at $15, you get access to the sponsorware, and the sponsorware is essentially just stuff that the author makes, but is only exclusively available to the people who sponsor them. So you get like this interesting idea where it's you can sort of think of it like as a parallel, almost like YouTube creators, only that instead of creating like YouTube videos or any other type of that content, you're getting software, right? And then like you can have other tiers that other tiers that basically if a company wants to sponsor you, you can say, hey, I'll put your logo in the project readmes, for example, right? Which depending on like how popular some of the projects you are could actually be decent value, because some of these GitHub projects actually get an insane amount of traffic. And that's another discussion actually, but yeah, no, that's essentially it. So with the introduction of that, and with the introduction of GitHub sponsors and the sponsorware concept itself, I started thinking that maybe we have a chance of actually like changing things in regards to how the status quo is in the InfoSec world and hacking world, specifically, both of those worlds, when it comes to open source tooling. Because as it stands now, the CEO of my company, John Strand, who are Black Hills Information Security, came up with this awesome term called a leech culture. And it really describes what's happening really well, in the sense that there are huge amount of companies that are worth multi-million dollar companies that are propped up by using these open source tools. Okay. And like, especially when it comes to pen testing specifically, or red teaming, and also on the blue team side as well. Like there's no area of InfoSec that isn't doing this right now, but
I can't think of any company that I've ever interacted with that isn't using some kind of open source tool.
Correct. Yes. And there are extremely expensive training companies as well, which I won't name, but you can probably think about who I'm talking about. I'm talking like insane expensive companies that use these tools as well. And initially 10 years ago, when I first started making these tools, and I started noticing that a lot of them were being used by these multi-million-dollar companies, extremely expensive training courses in InfoSec, I thought, well, this is fantastic. Everything is open source. They'll obviously contribute back to these tools if they're using it on a daily basis, because it's in their own interest at the end of the day, because they're using them, right? Well, absolutely not. I was very naive when it comes to this. And I think a lot of people that still do open source tools, that do open source stuff, are somewhat naive when it comes to this still as well, in my opinion, because they just don't contribute anything back. They really don't. They'll use the stuff and they will not contribute a single thing back, be it in terms of code, be it in terms of documentation, be it in terms of money, whatever you define as contributing back, I guess. They'll just use the stuff and they will not do anything. So, and this has been the status quo for years, like in the InfoSec community. I don't think it's ever changed, to be honest. I've never heard of a single, like there are a few projects out there that have become backed by InfoSec communities, like the Metasploit project. Metasploit was originally like open source, and then they sort of got merged into Rapid7, right? So there are a few, but that doesn't really count because there's like a pro version and stuff now. So
right, because at that point, then they got bought and were profitable.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's less of a.
Yeah.
I mean, it's still open source, but
it's still open source, but there's a pro version, and that's another thing too, right? So when I started coming up with some ideas, I had to like change the model about how this works, I had the option of saying, hey, I could take like CrackMap Exec, which is by far one of my most popular projects so far, and I could totally make a pro version of it, right? I can slap a $10,000 price tag on it. I can hire some salespeople. I can, and be on my merry way in terms of making it profitable. But the thing is, I didn't want to do that because I no offense, but I just don't like dealing with salespeople. And also, like it would be screwing over the people who I make these tools for in the first place, because I really don't want to do that, because the idea is that like in my mind, I'm making these tools for the small business on a budget that they can't afford like huge amount of expensive stuff, individual testers, consultants, that kind of thing. But like I really don't want to do that. So my idea was to basically sort of reverse the model and work with companies and incentivize contributions through giving out training vouchers, for example, is one of the things that I thought of, which was, and I'm trying to get the people on board on this, but essentially, like I partnered with Kali Linux, so I partnered with Offensive Security, and they're going to be giving me one training voucher for any of their courses per quarter, and I am basically going to be giving that away to whoever gives the best contribution to any of the tools that are currently in the Discord server on the Porchetta Industry Discord server. So as a individual, if you want a free offensive security training voucher, which is like $2,000, I forgot how much one of the courses, but it's probably around there, $2,000 value. You can just make an awesome pull request to any of the tools, which are not only mine, by the way. There are other people as well in the Discord server, and all the authors will get together once per quarter and judge who made the best one, and we will give this away. So that incentivizes contributions. Another thing we were trying to do also, and please stop me if I'm going on, but
no.
Please interject. But another thing I thought of was we can essentially work with companies to actually make them sponsor and individually single author, because another thing that's sort of inherent to the hacker community is that a lot of people who make these tools don't really want to market, quote unquote, their open source tool. Okay. And a lot of people are like that. They don't want to speak at conferences. They don't want to market their tools. They just want to put code out there. And a lot of people are like, I still debating about this internally, but at least in my opinion, like there's a lot of people out there that think that I have some elite skills. I got some elite code on my GitHub page, on my GitHub profile. Obviously, the InfoSec community and the hacking community will find it, and it will become popular without me doing anything whatsoever, right? And that's like, it might work. I have no data to say otherwise, to be honest, but in my experience, the only way like you have to get your product, quote unquote, not product, but I guess in terms of like actually making sponsorship money off of GitHub, you have to get it out there to the InfoSec community, right? So
unless you're already a known name.
Yeah, exactly. Unless you're already a known name. So that my thought as well was to basically, hey, I can help with this, right? I have a decent amount of Twitter followers, and quite frankly, I need something as an excuse to not delete the account because I'm getting so sick of that platform anyway. So I can help people. I can help people get the word out there in terms of retweeting their stuff. So I can help them in terms of marketing. I can give them some pro tips along the way, like helping them find cheap services for like nice little logos and stuff to just spruce up the readme. I can help them with that as well. So that's basically the idea, is that working with companies and sort of incentivizing both contributions to the tools, and at the same time trying to shift the culture so that it's not anymore acceptable that these companies are just leeching off of these tools without giving back in some way or another.
Okay, cool.
So
go ahead,
giving
Mr.
back, how much of your work has been yours, and how much has been, as a percentage, how much has been a contribution from somebody else?
That's a really good question. So 95% of like across all the stuff that I've published on GitHub throughout the like ever since I've created my GitHub profile has been my stuff, has been my contributions. There have been extremely few meaningful contributions, and by meaningful, I said this in the blog post as well. But meaningful, I mean stuff that is actually code and that actually implements some sort of feature that actually changes something and is not just fixing typos in the README, for example. And that's what I mean. So in the past 10 years, I've probably have gotten around 20 pull requests that were meaningful in that area. So it's, again, like the amount of contributions have been very, very small. And you can start arguing, okay, well, maybe it's because your code isn't good. Maybe because, there's no good documentation. There's no, there isn't a good plugin system. There isn't any, like, there's none of this stuff that would incentivize people to contribute. However, I've talked to other developers in the same space, both on the red side, the blue side, the purple side, you choose the color, and it seems to be the same thing. So very few pull requests, and this is especially in the blue team space. There are a number of people in the blue team space that make these insanely popular projects, insanely used projects, and they get very, very few contributions, let alone feedback and or donations for that matter. So it's sort of it seems to be a pervasive problem, at least from my experience.
So I have a question here. So you're putting code out on GitHub to the public. Would you argue that code is no longer yours once you've released it? And why can't I just fork it and go do my own thing and screw you?
Yeah, I mean, totally can. I mean, that's part of the open source. That's part of the open source ecosystem. That's built into how open source works, right? Especially if you have a very permissive license on the code. Like I usually use the BSD3 clause license, which is extremely permissive when it comes to this stuff, for most of my tools. So, but that's just the nature of open source. Absolutely. I mean, arguing, but the I guess to your question, like, is the code no longer yours? I mean, I would say no, because your name is in the license. You can totally track down who started the repository, like, through the forks and stuff. I mean, I guess it depends on I guess it depends on the context of what you're getting at, right? I think it depends on that.
I mean, I think it would be a dick move to copy somebody's awesome software and go make some money off of it.
Correct. But... Yeah. No, you totally could. But again, some of these permissive licenses allow you to do that. That as long as you, like as long as you retain the license, and publish the source code, you can totally make money off of anything that I write. But that's just the nature of open source, really. So
I guess if you didn't want that, you just wouldn't make it open source.
Correct.
And sell it.
Yeah, exactly. Like if I didn't want that, I wouldn't be making open source projects in the first place. Like I just make products on a private server somewhere and sell it, slap an insane price tag on it, which is most, InfoSec products seems to have in the 10, 20 grand range, and, call it a day.
Yeah. So you mentioned the GitHub sponsors is very much like Patreon. You can, so let's say you put, and we talk about this in the blog post, or you talk about this in blog post where you've created exclusivity to only Kali Linux. So there's a whole, bunch of flavors of Linux that are now, completely locked out for at least 30 days to updates to your software.
Correct.
I wonder about the motivations for that, if they're especially in security type updates, if you have any. I guess what I'm trying to figure out is what's your motivation here? I mean, yes, you want companies to give back, but why would companies want to pay you for something that you've already released publicly? And you'll just have to wait for his answer to that question next week. We're going to have part 2 with Bite Bleeder on the following week. Mr. Betcher can be found on Twitter at BetcherPwned, BOETTCHERPWNED. Ms. Berlin can be found at InfoSyster, INFOSYSTIR. Her nonprofit organization that raises awareness for mental health issues is at Hackers Health on Twitter. And you can follow the podcast at Brakesec, BRAKESCC, and you can follow me specifically on Twitter at Brian Brake, BRYANBRAKE. We have a Patreon. We appreciate all of our Patreon supporters for their monetary support. That helps us with things like domain hosting, Zoom accounts, being able to build our community, just time and effort of maintaining our Slack, which you can join us by sending a DM to Brakesec or emailing bds.podcast@gmail.com. Our patrons, if you're interested in helping out, even $1 is most helpful for us in terms of how much it costs to host a show or to maintain the level that we're at currently. So you can go to brakesec.com/BDS Patreon, and you can check that out. And we appreciate everybody who is helping us with that currently. We have a TPub store. You can grab a mask, t-shirts, coffee mugs, anything you want, stickers, all kinds of stuff. And that also gives us a little money back for every sale that we have. I believe this time of year, December 2020, they have sales on of various types. So you can buy enough for the entire family if you'd like. You can go to brakesec.com/tpub and check that out. We have Brakesec logo. We also have Ms. Berlin's face if you'd like to do that. To go back to the Slack, we have a moderated environment. We have a social contract. We expect mostly professional behavior at all times, but we have a lot of great discussions there. It's no politics requirement. And, we share threat intelligence. We have a threat hunting and a threat intelligence feed. We have a SIM and logging feed. So if you have worries about whether or not you're detecting certain things, you can get on there and ask questions. We also have some people who have been in the industry for many years. So there's opinions about vendors, there's opinions about software, and etc. So come join us on there. Again, send a DM to Brakesec or bds.podcast@gmail.com. We're on every major podcasting platform. You can leave us feedback there. We'd appreciate that. If you are unable to support us monetarily, as we always say, the podcast will always be free. Word of mouth advertising is worth its weight in gold, which for us is about 500 pounds of gold, which that's a lot of money. And it also gives us more visibility. So just like recently, we found out we're the #1 data security podcast in the world, according to certain groups. And we're actually #3 and #2 in countries like Jordan and the Ukraine and the UK. So we appreciate everybody in those countries listening to us, and feel free to tell your friends. We'd love to get more listeners from outside the United States. That was it for Bringing Down Security this week. Hope you have a great week. Be kind to one another. Take care of yourself, because you're the only you have, and please social distance whenever possible. Have a great week.